Now onto our prep. First thing we want to do with our prep after we cut, we want to make sure our cut lengths and our angles are identical. The matching members have to be the same when you put them together, or you're going to get an out of square frame, or you're going to get a wobbly table, and nobody wants that. So what we're going to do is take the two members that are going to be opposite one another, make sure the innermost line here is nice and even. You got a nice even line going through, but then you check it and make sure the opposite line. So we're pretty spot on for our cut, so we don't need too much preparation to get our lengths correct. Same thing with our longer legs. Our longer members are pretty accurate. So the next thing we would want to do is we would want to prep all the weld areas. Any place where you are planning on to weld, you want to take all the mill scale, dust, dirt, debris, oil, grease, rust, paint. You want to remove all of that and make sure you have nice, clean, metallic, shiny metal in order to weld on. That way you have the best weld. Now, what we're going to be using to take all of our burrs off and to get to shiny metal is an angle grinder, 4.5-inch angle grinder, and we're going to use roughly anywhere from a 40 to 60 grit flap disc to clean off our material in our weld zone. Now, let's check that out. When prepping, you have some decisions to make. It really all depends on where you are going to be welding, what joints and seams you want to weld up. So if you're going to put something that recesses inside this frame, you may not want to do the interior fillet weld. Also, if you want to keep this seam at the top, you may not want to grind that off or weld it because you have this nice kind of framed out seam in there. What we want to do is we want to only grind and prep the areas that we are going to be welding, because those are the only ones that need to be prepped. So this vertical front edge here, we want to grind that, and then of course 1.5 inches along this corner here, we want it nice and shiny. But it is entirely up to you. So if you do want to weld this top, you're going to want to grind that out. And of course, if you want to do the interior fillet weld, we want to grind that. So what we're going to do, we're going to leave the seam and we're not going to do the fillet weld on the inside of the frame. We're going to leave that free so we can drop some wood or glass inside this. Now, but we are going to grind all about 1/8 of an inch from this edge, 1/8 of an inch through this corner, and then underneath from this point to here, we want to grind all of that off. So when we put everything together, it's nice and clean. Now, the legs only need to be prepped at one end, but all the way around. So the entire area going all the way around this leg needs to be nice and shiny, about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch away from the weld area, so we can have a nice secure weld with good fusion. So that's what we're gonna do. Now, I know, here's a little trick for you. I know it's a little bit of a pain to clamp down each individual piece. So here's a little trick. You take your pieces, move them to the side like so, get them all lined up with a little bit of space in between them. Okay, and here's my 4 legs right here. I'll put a little bit of space in between them. And then what we can do is, there it is. Put that right there. You can get any kind of material that's just laying around the shop. This is just a 1-inch square tube. And then we'll just lock that down. And there it is. Now all the pieces are secured in place and we can grind them all at once and we can move quite a bit faster. So remember your protective gear. We're going to use the same flap disc, about 36-40 grit flap disc for what we're using, but you can use anything up to a 60 grit flap disc. Here we go. Actually, I didn't need to do that. We've taken down the welds with a 36 grit flap disc and then used an 80 grit flap disc basically to take the grooves out and to form around our radial edge and kind of smooth it out. But one thing you can never do, it's kind of an exercise in futility really, is to use anything that's round to make a flat surface. If you take a look at what we've just done, you can see a lot of pits and gouges where the going back and forth with the grinding disc has left these divots and indentations, so it's hard to get it flat. Now, if you like that look, go no further, you're done. But if you don't like that look and you want to get it nice and flat, you have to grind it with something that is flat. So we're going to use a DA dual action palm sander, and we're actually going to use this palm sander to flatten it out, take out those divots, take out the gouges, smooth it out, and make everything nice and even. We're going to use a pneumatic tool, an air tool palm sander, but you can use an electric one. We're going to be using an 80 grit sticky disc for this, and we're just going to try to get it as flat and as smooth, and we're also going to round the edges off to actually match the radial edge of the material. So we're going to get started on that. Anytime I am grinding, doing a heavy duty amount of grinding, and especially with more finer grit sanding papers, I typically will wear a mask just to avoid getting all the dust in my nose. So I'm going to do that. And this is also pretty loud, so fire this guy up.
Yeah, put a new pad on.
As you can see, the flat DA sander takes out all those dings, grooves, and roots that were left by the 4.5-inch angle grinder. It matches the material better, and we've now rounded that radial edge to match this edge as well. So this is a look that we're going for this particular table. I'm going to go ahead and do it to the other corners, and we'll see you in the next video.